The bucket truck showed up on a Tuesday morning, and about a dozen people came out to watch. Somebody filmed it on a phone. A man in a safety vest went up in the bucket, put a wrench on 2 bolts, and lifted a small black camera off a utility pole. The whole thing took maybe 4 minutes. There was some applause. Not a lot. Enough. That town had voted. The council had heard from residents for months. The contract came up for renewal, and the answer was no. The cameras came down. People went home feeling like they had won something. And honestly, they had. That vote was real. That camera is really gone. Here is the part nobody said out loud in the parking lot that morning. The camera on that pole was holding about 30 days of that town. 30 days of plates, timestamps, and locations on an automatic delete cycle. When the camera came down, that 30 days went with it. The system that holds years of you was never on a poll. It was never on any agenda. Nobody in that council chamber got a vote on it because it does not answer to a city council. It answers to customers. And it is still selling. My name is Ellen. I spent a long career on the inside of the American car business, first as an engineer, later reading regulatory filings and supplier contracts for a living, which is a slower and stranger way to spend your life than testing vehicles, but you learn where the money actually sits. This channel is where I show you the documents. Before I go further, one quick thing. I put together a field manual called What the Record Actually Says About Your Car. It walks through total loss math, repair estimates, premium filings, and what your vehicle records. You can download it, and the link is down in the description. That is the whole pitch. Back to work. Let me give you the real numbers, because this story only works if the facts hold. Automatic license plate readers went from a niche police tool to something close to everywhere in about 5 years. One anti-surveillance project has crowdsourced a map of more than 122,000 of these cameras nationwide. The largest vendor in the space reports contracts with more than 5,000 law enforcement agencies. And then, starting in about 2025, something happened that I did not expect. People started saying no, not in a coordinated way, in a very American, very local way. A council meeting here, a select board there. Public radio reported in February of this year that at least 30 localities had either deactivated their cameras or canceled contracts since the start of 2025. By this summer, one count put it around 23 city councils in 2026 alone, voting to cancel, reject, or shut off these systems across more than 20 states. Los Angeles police did not renew. Syracuse spent 8 months on it and had 13 readers pulled off city property in July. In Monroe County, Indiana, the commissioners voted 2-0 to break the contract early, and the county agreed to pay about $3,000 just to have the 6 cameras taken down. One commissioner said out loud that she thought the technology had reduced crime and voted to end it anyway. That is not an ideological vote. That is somebody weighing 2 real things against each other. And in Littleton, Massachusetts, at the end of July, town officials went looking and found that 5 cameras on public roads had been switched back on without anyone telling the town. The select board told the electric department to cut power to them, physically pull the plug. So this is a genuine movement, and it is bipartisan in a way almost nothing else is right now. Suburbs outside Detroit, college towns in Arizona and Oregon, small cities in Illinois, different politics, same question. Now, here is where I have to interrupt myself, because if I keep going in this direction, I am going to give you a false picture. Everything I just described is about one kind of camera, the kind bolted to a pole, paid for by a city, operated under a contract that a council can cancel. That system is the one that got the news coverage, the audits, the angry public comment, and it is the one with the shortest memory. There is a second system. Nobody has ever voted on it. It has been running since before most of these towns had heard the word telematics, and that is the one that has your last few years. Let me take these apart, because the difference is the whole video. Network 1 is what I will call the civic network. A city or a police department contracts with a vendor. Cameras go up on poles at intersections and neighborhood entrances. Every plate that passes gets photographed, read, time-stamped, and stored, whether or not anybody is under investigation. The important thing about this network is that it has a clock on it. The dominant vendor's default retention is 30 days, after which the data is hard deleted from cloud storage. Agencies can configure it. Some go shorter. Los Angeles police policy was somewhere between 7 and 30 days, and where state law speaks, it usually speaks in weeks or months. Virginia landed on 30 days after the governor sent it back. New Hampshire, which is the strictest in the country, requires non-hit records to be dumped in about 3 minutes. Utah caps it at 9 months. Illinois allows up to 5 years when a record is tied to an investigation, and Alabama sits near the loose end at up to 5 years as well. That vendor also states plainly that it does not sell customer data, that agencies own their own data, that sharing is opt-in, and that deletion is enforced by an automated storage rule and audited annually by an outside firm. I am going to come back to the arguments against them, because there are real ones. But on the specific question of selling your location history to a commercial buyer, that is not the business they are in, and I am not going to pretend otherwise just because it would make this story tidier. Network 2 is different in almost every respect. Network 2 is commercial. The cameras are not on poles. They are bolted to moving vehicles, repossession trucks, mostly. Independent operators who sign up as affiliates mount up to 4 cameras on a truck and get paid for volume. They drive their normal routes, doing their normal work, and the cameras run the entire time, photographing every plate they pass, a parking lot, a church lot on Sunday morning, your street at 6 in the morning. The largest of these networks says on its own website that it captures more than 500 million license plate scans every month. A court record put its stored archive at more than 9 billion images. A class action complaint filed against the company alleged the historical figure was above 20 billion scans, which the complaint translated to roughly 70 scans for every registered vehicle in the country. I want to be careful there. The 9 billion figure appears in litigation records and in the company's own contract language as reported by journalists. The 20 billion figure is an allegation made by plaintiffs in a lawsuit. Those are 2 different categories of fact, and I am not going to blend them. But here is the number that actually matters, and it is not any of those. The retention period on Network 2 is not 30 days. The company markets historical vehicle location. It sells what it calls vehicle location intelligence, including movement trends and predictions about where a vehicle is likely to be found. You cannot build a movement trend out of 30 days of data. The product is the history. The history is the asset, which means when your town voted the cameras off the poles, Network 2 did not blink. It was never in the room. Follow the money on this one, because it is short and it is clean. The commercial network is not some garage operation. In 2019, Motorola Solutions bought its parent company for $445 million in cash and equity. That parent held 2 subsidiaries. One sells to law enforcement, one sells to commercial customers. Same technology, 2 front doors. Expected revenue at the time of about $100 million a year. So when I say nobody voted on this, I mean it precisely. A publicly traded company bought a private surveillance archive, and the transaction that mattered was a purchase agreement, not an ordinance. Now, who buys the data? The company states its customers directly, lenders, to reduce charge-offs and make what it calls right-party contact, insurers for pricing at underwriting and for claims investigations, recovery agents, meaning repossession, and through resale arrangements, private investigators. Read that insurer line again slowly. Pricing at underwriting, claims investigations. Reporting from several years back described marketing aimed at insurance carriers around catching people who insure a vehicle in one state at a cheaper rate while actually living somewhere else. In the trade that is called rate evasion, and the honest version is that it is a real problem. People do lie about where a car is garaged, and when they do, the rest of us cover the difference. But look at the mechanism, because the mechanism is bigger than the abuse it was aimed at. To catch somebody garaging a car in the wrong state, you do not need to know where they parked last Thursday. You need a pattern. You need enough sightings over enough months to say this vehicle lives here, not there, which means the product being sold to insurers is not a snapshot. It is a location history with enough depth to argue with your application. And journalists who reported on the search interface described pricing that was, at the time, startlingly cheap, around $20 for a single plate lookup. around $70 to get alerts every time that plate got scanned again going forward. I want to flag that those figures come from reporting several years old, and I have not verified current pricing, so treat them as historical rather than a current price list. The order of magnitude is the point. This was never priced like a subpoena, it was priced like a background check. Here is the part that took me longest to get my head around, and it is the reason the two networks behave so differently. California passed a law back in 2015 aimed squarely at this technology. It applies to anyone running a plate reader network, public or private. It requires a posted usage and privacy policy, reasonable security, and records of who accessed what. Most people, when they hear that, assume the law reigns in the police first. It does the opposite of what you would expect. Government agencies operating these camera networks are barred from selling or sharing what they collect with anyone outside government. That is a hard limit written into the statute. Private operators do not have that limit. A private company running the same cameras, collecting the same plates, needs to post a policy and secure the data. What it does with the data afterward is largely left to that policy. As one California appellate panel put it earlier this year, the statute leaves private companies with wide leeway. Sit with that for a second, because it is the whole architecture of this story in one sentence. The public camera is the one that is regulated, audited, published, and votable. The private camera doing the identical thing is the one with the fewest rules and the longest memory. And this July, a California appeals court closed one of the few doors a driver had. On July 20th of 2026, the 4th Appellate District decided a case brought by a California driver against the commercial network. He argued the company was not really following the policy it posted, that its security was inadequate, and that customers were using the data for purposes the statute did not authorize. He sought to represent a class. The court affirmed summary judgment against him, not because the practice was blessed, because of standing. Under that statute, a person can sue if they were harmed by a violation. This driver could not point to an unauthorized disclosure, a security breach, financial loss, or any concrete consequence. His stated harm was that the collection itself invaded his privacy. The court said that is not enough. Actual harm means actual harm. And this is where I have to be honest, even though it cuts against the drama of this video, the court's reasoning is not unreasonable. Earlier this year, a different California appellate division found standing in a case where a parking operator never posted the required policy at all because the failure to post denied people the right to know who was collecting their information and why. So the courts are not saying nobody can ever sue. They are saying that if a company does post its policy, you need to show what actually happened to you, which sounds fair until you try to do it. Because how would you know? You do not get a notice when a plate lookup runs. There is no receipt. The scan that put your car in the archive happened when a truck you never noticed drove past a lot you were parked in. If an insurer priced your policy partly on a location history, that reasoning is not printed on your declarations page. The information you would need to prove harm is held by the parties you would be suing. That is not a conspiracy. That is a structural problem with proof, and it is worth naming as exactly that. Let me give the other side its best shot, because it is stronger than critics usually admit. Start with the plate itself. Every state requires it to be displayed in public view. Courts have noted repeatedly that a plate is photographed constantly in ordinary life, by traffic signals, by security cameras, by strangers with phones. The legal foundation for all of this is not exotic. It is that photographing something visible from a public street is generally lawful. Then, the recoveries. The commercial network's own contract, as reported by journalists who obtained it, claims it has helped recover more than 1 million vehicles since 2009. Every recovered stolen car is somebody who did not eat a total loss and a deductible. Every located collateral vehicle is a charge off a lender did not have to spread across other borrowers. The fraud argument is real too. Staged collisions, phantom vehicles, cars insured at an address nobody lives at, that is not a victimless activity. Those costs land in the loss ratios that drive the rate filings I have walked through on this channel before. If location data catches organized fraud, some portion of that shows up as premium the rest of us did not pay. And for the Civic network, the vendor's answers are specific rather than vague, which I always respect. 30-day default deletion, agency ownership, opt-in sharing, search logging. Independent annual audits of the deletion control. Those are checkable claims, not slogans, and several of them have been checked. Here is my honest read. The strongest version of the industry's case is not that surveillance is good. It is that plate reading is a lawful capture of a public fact, that it has documented recoveries behind it, and that the people objecting mostly cannot point to a specific person who is actually hurt. And the strongest version of the other case is not that anybody is plotting. It is that a permanent, purchasable movement history of ordinary drivers got built as a byproduct of repossession work, priced for the mass market, and folded into a publicly traded balance sheet, without one public vote anywhere in the chain. Both of those are true at the same time. I have not found a way to make either one go away. Let me draw the line clearly, because this topic attracts people who go further than the record does. Confirmed. The commercial network exists at national scale. It is owned by a major publicly traded company. It sells vehicle location data to lenders, insurers, recovery agents, and investigators. Its retention is long by design because history is the product. Most state plate reader laws regulate police use and say almost nothing about commercial sale. There is no comprehensive federal statute governing any of it. Also confirmed. Local audits have turned up real problems on the civic side. In Cleveland, audit logs reviewed by a local newsroom showed most searches of that city's data were run by outside agencies, some of them across the country. That is a governance failure worth its own video, and it is one reason so many councils started asking questions. Not confirmed, and I am not going to assert it. That your premium moved because of a plate scan. That any particular decision about you used this data, that anybody coordinated any of this. There is no evidence of a plan, there is a structure. The repossession industry needed to find cars. Finding cars generated a byproduct. The byproduct turned out to be worth more than the finding. Lenders and insurers had budgets for exactly that byproduct, and the law that regulates the cameras on poles simply does not reach the cameras on trucks. Nobody had to coordinate that. Aligned incentives do not need a plan. I will say one more thing and then move to what you can actually do. I am not saying that a location archive is being used against you. I am saying the archive exists, it is for sale, and there is no notice requirement telling you when it gets opened. Those are two different statements, and I have been careful all the way through to keep them apart. Now, the part that matters, because a video that only worries you is a waste of your evening. 4 things. None of them require a lawyer. 1. If you live in California, there is a window open right now. California built a state-run deletion platform under a law called the Delete Act. It is called DROP, and it lives at privacy.ca.gov. Residents have been able to file a single deletion request since January 1st of this year, and here is the timing that matters. As of August 1st, 2026, which was 3 days ago, registered data brokers are legally required to start pulling those requests and processing them at least once every 45 days, with penalties of $200 per request per day for failure. 2 honest caveats. There are legal exemptions, and not every category of data comes out. And whether any specific vehicle location company is registered is something you should check for yourself rather than take from me. The state maintains a public registry of registered data brokers, and it is searchable. Go look. That registry is worth 10 minutes of anyone's time regardless of what you conclude about cars. 2. Wherever you live, ask your counsel 2 specific questions. Not the general question, the 2 that produce documents. First, what is our retention period in days, and where is it written down? Second, which agencies outside our jurisdiction can search our data, and can we see the audit log? That second question is the one that has moved votes in city after city, because when the logs come back, people find out who has been searching, and if your town already canceled, ask a third one. Did the vendor confirm in writing that the historical data was deleted, and on what date? 3. Put the question to your insurer in writing, not on the phone, in writing, so there is a record. Ask whether third-party vehicle location data is used in underwriting or claims handling on your policy. Ask what outside data sources feed into your rate. If a rate goes up or a claim decision goes against you, ask which specific reports were relied on. You may get a clean answer, You may get a runaround, and either result tells you something. I am not going to tell you what your rights are in your state, because that varies and I am not a lawyer. Your state insurance department is the office that answers that question, and every one of them takes consumer inquiries. 4. Watch what your legislature leaves out. This is the one I would put at the top if I were ranking them. Lawmakers in around 35 states introduced close to 100 plate reader bills this year, according to research done through a legislative tracking service. 3 states passed laws in the prior session. More are moving. When a bill in your state comes up, read it for one thing. Does it apply only to law enforcement, or does it also cover private operators? Almost all of them cover only law enforcement. That gap is not hidden. It is right there in the definitions section in the first 2 pages, and it is the difference between a law that touches this problem and a law that photographs it. Your legislature's website publishes the full text for free. If the bill says agency, agency, agency all the way down, you already know what it does not do. I want to go back to that bucket truck. That vote was worth taking. I am not here to tell people who organized for months that they accomplished nothing, because they did accomplish something. They took a permanent camera off their street, and they made their local government explain itself in public. That is how this is supposed to work, and it worked. The thing I would want them to know is that the camera they could see was the one with the 30-day memory, and the one they could not see is the one with the years. Ownership and control are not the same thing. You own the car. You chose where to park it. And a photograph of it sitting there became somebody else's inventory, priced by the search, sold to people making decisions about your money. That is not a reason to be afraid of your own driveway. My own car is 12 years old and I have no plans to replace it, and I park it on a public street like everybody else. It is a reason to know which questions produce documents. What is our retention? Who can search it? What data sources touch my rate? What did this bill leave out? Every one of those has an answer sitting in a file somewhere, and in most cases that file is free. The document is the expert. Go read it. This has been the Owner's Report.